Hello everyone. We're continuing the liquid animation topic we started in the previous lesson. Today we will talk about the type of liquid animation that we have defined as elements to enhance animation. We are talking here about trails, drops, and stretchings. We will analyze several examples, address the questions of how to create liquid animations without knowledge of frame-by-frame animation, and most importantly, whether it is possible to get high-quality liquid animation only by means of After Effects. First, let's pay some attention to the elements that are used to enhance animation. The key message is in the name. Almost any trail or stretching is created over a finished animation, be it a dummy or a final product. After we complete such an animation, we proceed to create a trail or a stretching. Animation of the path parameter, lines with trim path animation, and the 3D stroke and particular plugins will help us with this. The choice of the tool depends on the result you want to get, and the style of the logo itself. At this stage, we set the dynamics of the entire animation and the way liquid animation particles move. After this, we move on to the next stage, stylization. Here we are finalizing the animation, and the following effects will come in handy here: roughen edges, blur, levels, echo, turbulence displace, and posterize time. Pay special attention to the first point, since in some cases adjustments in the dummy animation will entail adjustments in the entire project. So that's it with the pipeline. Let's move on to trails. In this tutorial, we will be balancing between frame-by-frame animation and After Effects. So first of all, let's figure out what animations can only be created in After Effects and which are only possible to make with the help of frame-by-frame animation. Let's start with this kind of animation. You can get a similar trail in After Effects in two ways: 3D stroke and roughen edges, as we did before, or particular and the same roughen edges. That's the effect you can find here and here. Moreover, we have prepared two examples. The first one was made frame by frame, and the second with particular, 3D stroke, and roughen edges. I spent several hours on the first, and 20 minutes on the second. Of course, there is a difference between the animations, but it is extremely insignificant. So, is it worth the pain? The answer is obvious to me. But quite often it is impossible to recreate frame-by-frame animation in After Effects. Here is one such example. Here the trail consists of 3 dissolving lines. In addition, the circle itself stretches and squashes. Such a trail cannot be repeated using After Effects or plugins. The same applies to such animations that constantly change their form and break into parts. And of course, frame-by-frame animation provides unlimited stylization possibilities. And here are some vivid examples. On this optimistic note, let's move on to practice, where you will learn how to create this liquid animation. So we already have an animated basis, and we will create a trail for it. There is nothing new for you. Animated 3D stroke and 2 layers of the logo revealed via trim path. We will be creating a trail for the first one. Roughen edges has already been applied to this layer. I have added it so that it combines better with the logo reveal. If you have any questions about this animation, you can find the source files of the entire animation attached to the lesson. And now let's finally deal with the trail. Create a solid, name it Trail, and apply particular to it. The first thing to do is make this layer a trail, and not just a static area emitting particles. Open the Emitter tab and first of all change emitter type to Lights. For this mode to work, you need to create a new light and name it Emitter. Be sure to call this layer that way, otherwise particular will not recognize it. We have selected this mode because the light will be the point where particles will be created. And since this is a separate layer, we can parent it or set any trajectory we want to it. And that's what we're going to do now. I will make particular strictly follow 3D stroke. For this, switch to mask path of 3D stroke and run the create nulls from paths script. Click trace path here. We have created a null that will move exactly along the mask path. 3D stroke and the null are out of sync at the moment. To fix this, delete keyframes from the progress parameter of the null and parent it to the end parameter of 3D stroke. And now the null precisely follows the start of 3D stroke. Put the anchor point of the null in the center and holding shift parent emitter to this null. Great. Hide the null and emitter and play the animation. Now everything is as it should be. Let's adjust particles. Let's switch to the moment when there are already quite a lot of particles and begin adjusting their appearance. First, you need to make them scatter less significantly. Go to Physics, Air. Here's the air resistance parameter. It is responsible for the wind strength, or rather resistance to it. Using it, you can also control how far away from each other the particles will move. Let's leave the value at about 40. Let's see if the result suits us. Yes, so far so good. Next, we will take care of the disappearance of particles. Here we need several parameters at once. First, let's set a keyframe for the particle/sec. We will animate it later. Go to the Particle tab and reduce the life parameter to 1.5 seconds. Let's also change the size parameter to 7 and make it more random. Change the size over the life graph to something like this. Let's see the result. Good. Particles, however, keep on appearing even after the animation ends. That's what we needed the keyframe for the particle/sec parameter for. Let's move it to the 12th frame and set the value to 0 on second 2. I want to draw your attention to one little aspect. The value of 0 means that 0 particles will be generated from this moment. So if you do not need particles in this frame, the keyframe with the value of 0 should be on the 12th frame, for the life of our particles is exactly 1.5 seconds. Such a mechanic is a bit unusual, but you need to keep it in mind when working with particular. We see a lot of particles accumulating at the very beginning of the animation, although they should not be here. To fix this, move the layer to the moment where we want the first particles to appear, like this. Great. And move the first keyframe to the start of the timeline. Let's also animate velocity, scattering particles a little at the end of the animation. Set the value to 1000 at second 2 and to 0 at the beginning. Let's see. Looks like what we need. Let's change particle type from sphere to cloudlet. They will look better when we add liquid effects. And we will take care of them now. Create an adjustment layer and name it Roughen. Add the corresponding effect. Raise scale to 220 and decrease border to about 2. OK, create another adjustment layer and name it Blur plus Levels. As you might have guessed, this is the combination of effects we will apply to it. I have set blurriness to 20. And next, draw the alpha channel with the levels effect in the usual way. Why do I do this on different adjustment layers? Everything is quite simple here. I need blur and levels to be applied to the whole composition, creating a liquid gluing effect, while roughen edges needs to be applied to 3D stroke and particular only. So move the layers with the logo above the adjustment layer with roughen edges. Play the entire animation. I think particles should be moving more actively. I want them to go up a little. Let's go to the Physics tab and change gravity to -1500. Much better. Let's also add turbulent field to slightly vary the way the bubbles move. I think the value of 100 in effect position will do. Let's also apply easy in to the first keyframes to make more particles appear in the beginning and dissolve a little later. The trail does not look very neat in the first frames. Let's decrease the number of particles to 70. It's fine now. You can even move the last keyframes a couple of frames backwards. I have made particles move up a little in this animation as if they are bubbles underwater. By changing gravity, wind, and turbulence parameters, you can create movement in any direction and of any intensity. And this is an incredible advantage over frame-by-frame animation, which makes you do everything anew for such changes. But there is also an evident drawback. You cannot control every single particle, which makes you less flexible. Here everything is up to you. Build on the style of the trail you selected and the result you want to get. Good. Particles move just as we need them to. I want to show another interesting trick. Create a solid named Explode. Apply Particular to it. Switch to Emitter and change emitter behavior from continuous to Explode. Now, instead of the constant generation of particles, they will appear only one time, as in an explosion. Change emitter type to text/mask, so that the mask is where particles appear. This mode is very similar to the layer mode we used in the previous lesson. Select the layer with the circle. We will create a mask on it. Now select this layer here in this tab and the mask will be found automatically. It is hardly visible so far, but particles fly out of this mask now. Let's deal with the particles and change their size, type, and the gravity and air resistance values. We are almost repeating the settings we have made for the trail. Raise the particle life parameter a bit, to 2 seconds. Particle type will be cloudlet as well. Set gravity to -2000. And increase the air resistance parameter to 40. Do not forget about turbulence field. Play the animation. Okay, let's make the particle size more random. And adjust the size over life graph. Let's also animate the number of particles. 250 in the beginning, decreasing to 0 over time. Let's see. Not bad, but let's change the wind parameter along the y-axis so that the particles fly up more intensively. We still need to choose the moment to launch this explosion. I want to do this after the line is revealed, to emphasize that the logo has been created, and then make a fading effect with bubbles. And final animation. As you can see, Particular is quite a flexible tool. You can get completely different results by changing just a couple of parameters. When it comes to trails of such type, it is much easier and faster to create them with Particular than to draw them frame by frame. Of course, we can pre-compose the animation and stylize it. With Inner Shadow, for example, it allows you to create such a soft shadow or achieve the grainy gradient effect by adding a little noise. That is up to you. Now try to create a similar trail for your completed animations. It will look especially good on lettering. Meanwhile, we are moving on to the next topic, tearings. The work pipeline here is exactly the same as with trails. We have the main animation we will enhance later. You can convey completely different feelings and states with your animation. It can be something like paintball paint breaking into droplets, or something more viscous, more like rubber. Here we can add the gravity effect, which only emphasizes the liquid nature of the entire animation. But as in the trail example, it is all about tools and time. For almost any complex and detailed animation is done frame by frame, and it is almost impossible to recreate such things in After Effects quickly. But this does not mean that you can't get spectacular animation in After Effects. We will analyze this example now, and you will see that even not heavily detailed effects will still look great, especially when the whole word is animated in this way, not just a couple of letters. We have already prepared the main animation. It consists of two shape layers. The letter A is animated with path and scale. I have set the overall motion vector using scale with elastic. Then I have animated the shape with paths to make the animation more expressive and flexible. The stick forms the letter A, which in its turn forms the letter I. The move itself was made with the help of position. Note that there are two paths. The first one is the point that flies out of the stick after the stop, and the second is the stick itself, and all this is enhanced by the bend effect, used to create an impression that elements kind of resist the process of separation. The same effect is applied to the letter A. It stretches to its maximum, maintains its shape for a frame, and then shrinks a little. This simple trick allows you to create the effect of stretching before they tear apart. The same goes for the letter I. We have analyzed the main animation, so let's move on to creating stretchings. Select a frame where the letter stretches to its maximum. Let's create a shape like this one with the pen tool. It will connect two halves of the letter A. Draw exactly the same one below. Let's set keyframes for paths for both shapes. Since this frame will be the peak of stretching, we need to make the shapes as thin as possible, like this. Let's make them of the same color as the letters. Next, let's create an adjustment layer and apply roughen edges to it. We will use it to tear these two lines. After applying it, adjust the scale and border parameters. We need the lines to tear and the letter to keep its shape. That's it. Now let's remove the translucent areas. Let's apply levels and draw the alpha channel for this. The whole letter got pixelated a little, mostly due to the fact that After Effects pixelates images when you zoom in a lot. Ignore this for now. Let's change the shape of the lines a bit so that they look like stretched drops of glue adhering to the surface. Adjust the roughen edges and levels parameters as well. Having done that, we will animate path of the lines. First, let's change the frame we are on. The line will be already torn here, so let's leave only what remains on each side. To create a tearing, you just need to narrow path in the right place and it will tear apart under the influence of the effects. Move a couple of frames back and make the line thicker. Then move to the frame where the letter A has not been divided into two parts, and narrow path of the stretching. In the same way, move forward on the timeline and stop every couple of frames to animate path of the shape. Start with thicker lines and gradually make them thinner. Always try to keep the edges of the shape rounded, thereby creating an impression that both the letter and shape are one shape that is being deformed. Adjust the last frames a bit so that you almost can't see the remaining lines. Having finished the lower stretch, repeat all the same operations for the upper one. And here's another rather important point you need to know about. Use regular linear keyframes for such animations. It's better to place a couple of extra keyframes, which will give you more control, just as we are doing now. Then create two keyframes in the beginning and the end and try to extend the entire animation with an easing. Sometimes this can work, but it is better to use easings when you can easily predict the result. The animation graph of the letter and the easing on the stretchings most likely will not coincide, so the two animations will be out of sync, and you will have to make additional adjustments as a result. Let's cut the shape layer and see what we got. I have forgotten to cut the layer in the beginning. Let's fix it. The animation in the attached files has more of these lines, but they are all made in the same way, so we will not dwell on them now. Instead, I will add stretchings between the letters A and I at the very top. The point is the same. Move to the frame of the peak of stretching and create a shape. Set a keyframe for path. OK, now parent this layer to the letter so that it moves with it. And now repeat everything we have done for the letter A. Keep on moving a couple of frames forward, changing the line path. Remember that the entire animation should look as one whole, while transitions from the stretching to the letter should be smooth and neat. So we have reached the point where the line suddenly tears apart. Let's make the drop follow it. Cut the layer with Ctrl-Shift-D. Remove the stretching on the left, and make it in the shape of a drop on the right. It will fly after the letter I by inertia, gradually growing smaller. It will end up absorbed by the letter I. Play the animation to see the result. The drop is flying too slowly. Move the keyframes a little closer to each other. Let's see. Still not enough. Move them a little more. Here we still need to maintain the stretching a little longer. Adjust this frame, leaving the tearing unchanged. That's better. And move the last two keyframes one frame back so that the drop moves faster. Let's play the entire animation. Good. Well, the last thing we need to do is add stretchings when the point of the letter I appears. Let's create a separate layer for this and animate the letter path. I will make 3 stretchings that will become thinner as the point moves up. We are doing the same things as before, but there will be a slight difference. I want the point to pull off the particles of the stick, tearing apart at some point, while the letter particles rapidly return to their place. And in this case, it is enough to animate only one path, without changing the shape of the point itself. Set keyframes in a similar way, every few frames. Try to play or scroll the animation you are working on more often. It is easier to notice some minor bugs or just places that you want to improve this way. To emphasize the moment of tearing, add another keyframe in which the stick will slightly deform, when the stretchings return to it as elastic bands that bounce back when torn. Okay, everything is ready. Let's see the final animation. Everything is fine. By adding a couple more stretchings to the letters, you will make the animation even better and more effective. And that's what you will need to do in your homework. We have finished the practice for today. Let's summarize a little. In this lesson, we have tried to distinguish the techniques and methods used in liquid animation to understand how they work and when they are to be applied. There are actually no limitations and strict rules. Completely different techniques are often combined in liquid animation. Let's take this animation for example. It has everything, from a regular shape animation with which you can make the main movement of the letters, to three-dimensional shapes into which circles morph. And all of that is packed into a beautiful liquid animation with tearings and trails. And here's another example. A frame-by-frame stylized scene in 3D, resulting in something cool. Only your imagination and available tools can limit you here. Only the final result matters. No one will know how you achieved it. After Effects has a lot of tools that can save a lot of your time and bring you a good result. But it is not an ideal tool, especially for liquid animation. Here, frame-by-frame animation and a whole bunch of programs to use it comes in handy. Photoshop, Animate, Toon Boom, and many more. But such animation will always take a lot of your time and effort, especially if you are new to this. We advise you to cheat whenever possible and not to forget about development. Hone your skills and try something new. Even something unexpected may catch your interest. We have not shown how to create liquid effects frame by frame in this lesson specifically. We have the frame by frame fundamentals course, which will allow you to get familiar with it in detail and try yourself in it. This is where our lesson ends, but you still have cool home assignments to do. Good luck! See you in the next lesson.